on.
There you go.
Rookie mistake.
There you
Kids
go.
are getting ready to go out to school there, John. So the
There
house got a little noisy. I didn't want to step on anything you're saying.
I gotta have mutes on the finger at all times myself, Mark. You never know.
The dogs?
Yeah. Mainly the dogs. I got the landscapers here, so you might hear some of that. Yeah, they always tend to come when the show's on the air. Funny how that works.
Yeah, copy that. I was saying as I was muting myself, Jody McDonald's off again today. I am in with the great John McMullen here on Birds 365. It is my great honor. John, I have a concern, and it's something we haven't touched on yet, and I don't think I'm alone in this concern. The biggest change for the Eagles this year is that they have two new coordinators. Obviously, Brian Johnson with the offense, and they have Sean Desai with the defense. The number one thing I'm going to be looking for, and it's going to be a long buzzword, organization. I don't want to see false starts. I don't want to see, I can't hear the call. What's the call? Did it go again? If Nakobe Dean plays, whoever their middle linebacker is, whoever's going to be the green dot, I want to see easy communication between the sidelines and the field, and I want to see an organized, well-coached game.
You're asking a lot. You're asking a lot.
Is it really that much?
Well, I watched about 10 minutes of preseason football last night. I, was sitting down, got out the iPad, got out the NFL Plus, and it was Seattle, Minnesota, the late game. And in those 10 minutes, I think I saw 5 penalties. So it's not just the Eagles. They've had a lot of pre-snap issues. And then, I asked Nick about the tweak in the schedule this week because the Eagles added a Tuesday practice. They moved the Wednesday practice to Lincoln Financial Field. I just said, what's that about? Because that's kind of weird to change a training camp schedule. And, he was pretty honest about it. He didn't say, and he was talking about how he did not like the communication at the open practice at the link. And then we get there on Wednesday, and you probably saw the story that got, the Eagles up in an ire because Howie's over there yelling at Sean Desai to pay attention, essentially. And that's what he was doing. So the Eagles can, poo-poo it all they want. But the GM had to tell the defensive coordinator, yo, dude, this is ones versus twos. Get the right people out there. I don't know. You tell me how you take that, Mark.
That's a story. And look, if I was the Eagles, yeah, I would not be happy that got out, but that's on me. Like, have a little accountability. That's on you. That's on the Eagles. That's not on a reporter to put it out there. That's newsworthy. I want to know about that. If I'm an Eagles fan and I want to know what's going on in the link in a practice period that I'm not invited to, that's a little tidbit of information I'd like to know.
We all report it. I mean, it's what we saw. We're allowed to report it. They're trying to, couch it the best way possible. And for those people, and there are, I go back to, because I asked Jonathan Gannon a question last year, and Jonathan, as he is apt to do it sometimes, sticks his foot in the mouth, and he mentioned Howie Roseman when it came to game planning, if you remember that, Mark.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And that became a thing. And basically, he just misspoke. Howie's not involved with game planning, but he's in charge of the roster. So, he's got to tell the coaching staff what's up personnel-wise. And that's what he meant. That's all he meant. But, people are like, Howie's involved with game planning. What is Howie doing involved with game planning? And the same thing here. What's Howie doing on the field? He's always on the field, number one. He's the GM of the football team. But,
yeah.
And he was just the closest guy to Sean Desai. So it was sort of a chain thing, telephone. So
Right.
it's like, yeah,
Look,
it's like, hey, dude, get it right, basically.
I will say this. I feel like, especially in the early goings with Nick Sirianni in his first, two preseasons, I have felt like them for the most part. They have been organized. They have been, well coached. They have been ready to go. They've been, somewhat disciplined. So I don't feel like it is a big ask. I feel like it's a bare minimum. Like, just show me that you got these guys organized, ready to go. Look, penalties are going to happen. You're going to have false starts. You're going to get drawn off sides. But in the first quarter of the game, or however long you have most of your starters in, I just want to see that it's organized. I want to see the communications there. I want to see that they're on the same page as far as all that goes. And Brian Johnson, I know they have this great relationship, him and Jalen Hurts, but they haven't had this relationship yet. Offense coordinator, play caller to quarterback. And that's the new relationship that they got to work on. So, and Nick Sirianni, one thing I did like about what he said, it wasn't just his coach's communication, it was his own communication. So he did put some of the blame on himself there. But when it comes to Sean Desai and it comes with Brian Johnson, I just need to see that whatever language they're speaking on the sideline is the same language they're speaking during the game.
Yeah, well, I think there's going to be some hiccups.
John. Oh, boy. Oh, this is not going to be fun.
Well, if you go back to, people forget, if you go back to Nick's first year, they had the big win in Atlanta, and then they, kind of fell off the rails. They were 2-5 before they turned it around. I think they were either first in the NFL in penalties or second over that span. They were committing a lot of penalties. And there's like a give and take to their philosophy where they don't practice a ton. And that's the give. I mean, early in the season, you're probably going to be a little bit sloppy. They don't have a lot of grass time, as Doug Peterson would say. And I agree overall with their philosophy, which is, basically you don't have the time to prepare like you used to anyway. So it becomes the cost benefit of get to week 1 as healthy as possible. I agree with that. Get there as healthy as possible. But you're going to have some hiccups. And that's with, if Steichen was back, if Gannon was back, if Denard Wilson, I still think they would have some hiccups because they don't practice that much. So, I think it's kind of baked into how they do things a little bit.
Fair enough. When it comes to Brian Johnson, obviously Sean Desai is a story that's out there that's not exactly very encouraging, but, it happened, so it's worth talking about. The other part of it is Brian Johnson. So is there been anything that Nick Sirianni has done different this year with new defensive and offensive coordinators in terms of giving them more of an opportunity before the season starts, before you get into your first preseason game, to have them call plays on their own, run that 2-minute drill where they're calling the plays and they're working on that communication? Is anything different this year when it comes to the way that Nick Sirianni is organizing his practices with his two new coordinators?
No, I just think maybe he's a little bit more hands-on, but he's always been hands-on. Like, I think he's more hands-on with the defense than he was when Gannon was here. And he knew Gannon for a longer period of time. They coached together in Indianapolis. So, that'll probably grow. But he's always been a hands-on guy. Like, when he first got here, he was all over the receivers, and he was a receiver. And I was like, all right, does this guy know he's the head coach? Because he's just micromanaging the receivers. And the Eagles were having issues at the time at that position. And Aaron Moorhead was the coach, and he was a holdover. There was talk he wasn't coming back, then he was. I think they were looking for another receiver coach. It all worked out because DeMonte turned into DeMonte, then they got A.J. Brown. But he was really hyper-focused on the receivers. And I think he's been hyper-focused a little bit more on the defense. And he should be, because the offense has so much talent. They got to replace 2 starters. The defense has a new coordinator, new linebackers coach, new secondary coach. Got elevated, but Denard Wilson isn't here. 5 new starters. There's much more change on the defensive side, so it makes sense. And Nick's a CEO head coach, and he pays attention to all parts of the team. So I think a little bit more this year than in the past.
So a little bit more hands-on for Nick Sirianni is a difference. When it comes to Brian Johnson, though, how has he come off when you're down there as far as communicating with Jalen Hurts, communicating with his entire offensive unit? I know one of the first things that Jason Kelsey talked about when it came to any order of praise for Brian Johnson was that his communication was exactly where you wanted it to be. It was exactly what Shane Steichen kind of brought to the table, what Nick Sirianni has brought to the table, like communication on all levels with everybody. So obviously that's a great thing. But when it comes to him on the field, does he look like a guy that's comfortable out there in his new role? Is there any learning curve for him that he is trying to get under wraps before he's on the sideline for his first NFL game, albeit preseason, calling plays?
Well, there's a learning curve, but I don't – Brian's not uncomfortable with anything. I mean, for those who don't know, he was a pretty good college quarterback at Utah, so I think that factors into it. So he's got that quarterback presence about him, and he called plays at the college level at a bunch of different places. So it's not like he's never done it before, but, you know, you're always going to have hiccups when you're doing it for the first time at the NFL level. You know, I've always described it like this, Mark. It's Nick's offense. But we've already seen Nick as a play caller and Shane Steichen as a play caller. With all due respect to Nick, I love you, buddy. Shane's a better play caller. He just is. There's a feel for it. And I give Nick Sirianni a lot of credit for saying, you know what? This is a big job, and I want to be involved with this and this and this and this. So I'm going to hand this off to this guy who's really good at it. And he was really good at it. Is Brian Johnson going to be as good as Shane Steichen? Probably not. I'm my comfortable. If I were an Eagles fan, I'd say I want him to be better than Nick at least. But Shane was really good. I have a ton of respect for Shane as a play caller.
See, just looking at it, no pun intended, from a bird's eye view, I really just don't think Nick Sirianni is a very good play caller, and I think Nick Sirianni knows he's not a very good play caller. He'd rather be able to, be that very general, where he's kind of just managing everything there on the sideline. Sure, making big decisions, fourth downs, and all that stuff. What type of play they're going to run in a crucial moment. Sure, he'll get involved in that. And game planning, he wants to do all the homework in the world, and then he wants Brian Johnson essentially to take the test. But when you have a guy who's never called plays at the NFL level and there's no feeling out period, it's just, yeah, he's going to do it. And you mentioned the experience. Yes, you can talk about his college career as a player. You can talk about his college career as a coach. You can talk about all that. He's got the experience, but not at the NFL level. So I think of it more as an admission of Nick Sirianni of, look, I understand what I'm good at. I understand where I can thrive. So I'm going to put other people in a position where they will, I know, have more success than I would. Like, yes, Nick Sirianni is a play caller. No, thank you. But Shane Steichen, I agree with you 100%, was great at the role. Brian Johnson is still very much an unknown. I love all the beautiful stories of puppy dogs and ice cream about Jalen Hurts and him having this wonderful relationship since Jalen Hurts was 4 years old. But they've never had this relationship where they've had to call plays into the other, had that feel for where the other's at. That's one thing that should be great. But until I see it on the field at a consistent basis, and we're not going to really see it until the season really starts, obviously. We'll get a taste, hopefully, in the first preseason game. But we won't really know until the situation is at hand.
Yeah. And by the way, with Nick, I'm a big CEO coach guy. I'm surprised.
I love that term for head coaches. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised more owners don't go in that direction because, there's a cliche around the NFL. It's been there for years. If you're hiring a scheme, you're doing it wrong. Meaning, somebody could have success somewhere. Nathaniel Hackett, perfect example, has great success in Green Bay. Gee, I wonder why.
Right.
And then he goes to be a head coach and he's a disaster. because it's a much bigger job, and it's not just about a scheme or a philosophy on one side of the football. Probably the biggest part of being a head coach is managing personalities. And but that stuff's intangible. There's no grade, there's no number. Everybody's got to have a number to explain Nick Sirianni's good at managing people. People in your jobs over the years, Mark, you probably had good people in positions of power who were managing people well, and you probably had bad ones at some point, and you could tell the difference. Same thing with coaches. And I'm surprised how many every year, so-and-so had a good offense in wherever, or so-and-so had a good defense. Let's hire that guy. When it's about, like, people hate that I think Jonathan Gannon is a good coach. People hate that. Howie Roseman told Eagles fans, we're renting this guy. He's going to be a head coach. He's got a presence about him. I see fans in the chat. Sean Desai is going to be a head coach a year or two down the line. No, he's not. No, he's not. You don't see the difference between the personalities. To be a head coach in this league, you have to manage people well. Be a great defensive coordinator. Jim Johnson, right? Didn't want to be a head coach. He knew his limitations. Great defensive coordinator. There's so many great coordinators that are bad head coaches. So many.
The Peter principle. You want to rise to the point of your own incompetence, and then you go, oh, yeah, this isn't for me, and then get the hell out. Yeah. Or someone says, you need to get the hell out. But by the way, real quick, just because you mentioned bosses, shout out to the best boss I ever had, Fred Godelli, producer of Sunday Night Football, producer of Thursday Night Football on Amazon, now going to be an executive with the network. Just went into the Football Hall of Fame this past weekend. So congratulations to the best boss I ever had, Fred Godelli.
There we go.
How about that?
Example.
Perfect.
Nicely done.
I'm going to tell you right now, you want to talk about accountability? Whether you were number 120, if you were crew member 120 on the production list, and for the record, I think I was like 118, so there's two below me, or you were Al Michaels, Chris Collinsworth, whoever, you were treated all the same, man. Accountability at your job.
See, that we're going to disagree, because I always love Jimmy Johnson's quote.
It's the best. I know. Yeah.
It's like, and obviously we're talking about the Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin era. It was like, I'll treat you all fairly, but I'm not treating you all the same.
What is it? The other one was some are more. I thought you treated all your players equal. Some are more equal than others.
Yeah, well, that too, and that's what he was saying. And he's right. I mean, let's be honest. You see it all the time. The talent versus tolerance equation when guys get in trouble. If you got a lot of talent, you're liable to get that second chance a lot more easily than the 53rd guy on the roster. Although, as Josh Sills proves, Jeffrey Lurie, and I've always respected this about Jeffrey Lurie, and he's been consistent. You either believe in second chances or you don't. Simple. And in the case of Josh, some people will say he was acquitted. And I was surprised, when that happened, because those were serious allegations, ugly allegations, Mark. And the Eagles got his stuff out of the locker room quick. I was like, well, we're never going to see Josh again. But, to their credit, the organization, he was acquitted, and they said, well, he's a part of the team. We're going to give him a chance to come back. And the same thing with Devontae Smith. A lot of people had a problem with that. I don't know why. Devontae missed practice on Wednesday because he went out to Henry Ruggs' sentencing hearing. It's one of his best friends in the world. Obviously made a devastating mistake that ruined his career, ruined people's lives, more importantly. but he's still his friend, you know? And he was back yesterday, and Jalen Hurts hugged him before practice. He's obviously, broken up about it. That to me shows the guy's character. You're not abandoning your best friend who made a horrific mistake, and he's got to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. No, certainly. Jeffrey Lurie throughout his tenure here has been a big proponent of second chances in many different facets. I'll add to that. I mentioned before the last break, John, we were talking about the tight ends. Where are we at with the Eagles tight ends? In honor of our friend Jody McDonald, who's off another day today, he'll be back with you guys, I think, on Monday. It's a very interesting thing here with the tight ends. I feel like in Philadelphia, we've been very, very used to the Brent Selleck to Zach Ertz to Dallas Goedert. Like there's always been somebody there in the wings. And hey, look, Goddard's still a guy that a prime athlete, so we're not looking for anyone to pass the baton to. But sometimes we can pull focus a little bit. I know they've been high on Tyree Jackson for a long time. He hasn't been able to kick the injury bug in the early goings of his career, making the transition from quarterback to now this monster at 6'7" as a tight end, 6'8" as a tight end. They like what Stahl brings to the table. At the tight end position. So where are they going here? Where are they going here when it comes to who is tight end 2 and 3 when it comes to this Eagles offense?
Well, Jack Stoll is tight end 2. I mean, that's not even a debate.
Okay.
So Dallas and Jack are locked in. And then it becomes who's going to be the third tight end. And I think it's going to be boring. At the beginning of camp, I thought Dan Arnold had a really good chance because of where this team is. He's been a good receiver in this league for a long time, but he's not a very good blocker. He's bounced around, was really good in OTAs. And I said, that's a Super Bowl player. This is a Super Bowl contender. That's a guy that can help you maybe in week 13 make a big catch and get you over the top, win a big game. And whereas I would say if this were a 5-win team, a 6-win team, then you keep Grant Calcaterra because he's got a higher ceiling. He's younger. So I thought Dan Arnold had a really good chance to make this team, but he hasn't done much in training camp. So for now, I would say it's going to be chalk, and it's going to be Goddard, Stoll, and Calcaterra. And they'll have some guys on the practice squad. Maybe even you go about it that way and keep Dan Arnold because you can have veterans on the practice squad now. So there's a lot of different things you can do. But for right now, I think, Grant has outplayed Dan Arnold. I didn't think that would happen, to be honest. And with Tyree, yeah, I mean, it's tough he makes splash plays, but he doesn't do the little stuff well. And it makes sense. He's a quarterback. He was a quarterback at Buffalo in college. He was a very good quarterback. That's a very difficult transition that was derailed twice because of pretty significant injuries. I don't think he's threatening Grant Calcaterra at this point.
Have we reached the end of the line with Tyree Jackson here in Philly?
I'll never say that because the practice squad is 16 guys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
fair enough.
And I think they can get them through waivers. And there's always the physical gifts. And you say, well, if the light goes off, that could be something. And you've seen it in Washington with Logan Thomas. That's what they were kind of hoping for. He was a quarterback and pretty high level quarterback in college and ultimately took years, but ultimately turned into a really good tight end. I think that's sort of the template they're hoping for. And he's still young. Keep him on the practice squad.
I am at some point looking forward to another tight end target not named Dallas Goedert. I mean, this team's got plenty of weapons, so this is not a big glaring problem at all with the Eagles. But if they need a tight end to make a play for them in the event that Zach Ertz, and he has missed time in his career, very talented player. I said he's going to crack the top 100 next year if he stays healthy. He's been like the number one guy. Him and Landon Dickerson, I think, are top 100 guys next year. They stay healthy. But who's the guy that can catch a football after Dallas Goedert on this squad from the tight end position?
Well, I think that's where And that's why I kind of thought Dan would make the team, because Dan would be that guy, but he just hasn't had a great camp to this point. There's still time, maybe he shows up against Cleveland. Jack, though, he's not going to be splashy, but Jalen Hurts really trusts Jack Stoll. And he mentioned it last year when Dallas was hurt. The first rule of any receiver is don't fool the quarterback. Never fool the quarterback. Jalen Reagor always fooled the quarterback. That's why he's not here anymore. He's out in Minnesota fooling Kirk Cousins. He's never where he's supposed to be. Jack's always where he's supposed to be. He's not going to be splashy. He's not going to make splashy plays. They don't have that player. They don't have but he's a good blocker. So it's kind of most teams in the modern NFL don't have tight ends that can block well, and it affects the running game. The Eagles have 2 tight ends who can block. So that's kind of a positive.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. I'm just worried because we talk about injuries all the time. And Dallas Goedert obviously plays a demanding position, and he's one hell of a run blocker, so they use him a lot in that facet as well. So he is somebody who is in peril more than just the average pass-catching tight end. The guy can make plays with the ball in his hands, the ball targeted to him, or he can make plays by being able to throw his body around as well. So definitely a concern. When we come back, speaking of concerns, there's something that the Eagles did this week with their roster that raised some eyebrows, and it came to that offensive line. We'll talk about that when we come back, as far as how it can affect the center position of the Eagles and the right guard spot as well. When we return here on Birds